Azoth by Zeitgeistic. Chapter 7. Commixtion. Commixtion, the combination of the ingredients into a new substance. On Sunday, Hermione and Millicent followed them to the broomsticks for fantasy Quidditch because they were, as Hermione put it, bored. It was Draco's turn to buy drinks, finally. He returned to their table and passed drinks around, but when Harry sipped his eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I know," Draco said, leaning back, one arm slung around the banquette behind Millicent's shoulders. Harry very determinedly did not stare at it. "I'm a constant wonder." "Oh, for Merlin's sake," Millicent said upon tasting her own drink, which, like Harry's, was not a faux beer, but a real beer. Gave Harry a direct look. "He's in one of his moods, to be sure. Never drinks at Quidditch otherwise." "What sort of mood is that?" Hermione asked. "The sort where I know my team's about to cream Potters, and I'm being a gentleman by getting him drunk first to soften the blow." "How kind of you," Hermione observed. Harry narrowed his eyes. "You subbed in Yaxley, didn't you?" Draco smiled. "Might have." "Bollocks," Harry decided. "I thought for sure you'd have Merryweather fly instead. I got Peregrine on." "I know," said Draco, quite pleased with himself. Millicent snorted. "Looks like you're back to second place, Potter." He only scowled in reply. The game started shortly after, and the three broomsticks was soon filled with the constant, exhilarating hum of drunken cheers and cheer. Hermione took to asking Draco about his progress with the animagus transformation, which, judging by Draco's scowl, he liked not at all. "But once you've got to visualization, you're set," she said, brows crunched in confusion. "You know your animal?" "Yes," said Draco, and neatly ignored the part where Hermione had been angling for him to tell her what it was without her having to ask. Harry hid a smirk behind his not-faux beer. He liked the way Draco's eyes slid to the side a bit when he was especially pleased with something he'd done. He liked the way the grey of them reflected light from an angle. He liked pretty much everything. Hermione leaned forward. "So why haven't you completed the indigenization then? It's easy." "If it's so easy, why haven't you finished it?" Hermione scowled, and Harry let out a little huff of laughter. Hermione's eyes slid to his. They were dark with the promise of murder if he brought up her own animagus troubles. "Well, I didn't like to." "Bollocks!" He narrowed her eyes, and Draco leaned back, arms crossed over his chest, smirking. His legs stretched out beneath the table and tangled with Harry's. Harry tensed. He didn't move them. They stayed like that, warm and connected with Harry's body, and he imagined a different situation when their legs might be tangled, only without the woolen trousers between them. He shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Draco's legs remained, the toe of his shoe pressed against the back of Harry's calf. Tingles ran up his skin, and he allowed himself a moment to close his eyes and feel it. "I bet I can get my form before you can," she said. "What's your form?" asked Millicent. Harry cackled. Hermione kicked him and made Draco move his legs back, which was the opposite of what Harry wanted. Suddenly bereft and feeling sort of cold about the leg area, he thought now would be a good time to pay Hermione back for that time when he'd been enjoying the feel of Draco's legs against his own and she'd ruined it. Which was just now. He had never been one to sit on an opportunity for revenge. "Your cat," said Harry, ignoring Hermione's indignant squeak. "Not Peep, the less annoying one before him." Millicent was nonplussed. "Dark Lady is your animagus." Draco snorted. Hermione's fingers clenched around her glass. "Yes," she bet out. "The result of a polyjuice accident. I hate you, Harry. Never fall asleep in front of me again." Draco was by this point laughing so uproariously that Madame Rosmerta was beginning to send their table disconcerted looks. "You're shitting me," said Millicent. "I shit you not," said Harry, barely containing his laughter. "Same markings and all." "Oh, Harry," Hermione muttered. "Just you wait. 7 years we've been friends." "And you'd throw it all away to kill me?" he asked with a grin. "Gladly." she said, staring murderously at her glass. Harry erected a muffling charm over their table and settled in to listen to Millicent question Hermione about her abandoned animagus form. It was at that point, when Hermione was describing the degree of stripe delineation along her form's right flank, that the feeling of warmth returned to Harry's calf. He stilled, looked up from beneath his lashes. Draco was staring back at him, expression still. "You never said," Draco murmured. Harry swallowed, but tried to hide it. "Never said what?" "That you were good at anything. When I asked you, you said average." "I am average at transfigurations." Draco shrugged. "You're nearly there, aren't you? I watched you in the common room the other night. You were indigenizing again, relearning, all in the space of a few hours." "I figured I might as well finish," said Harry. He shifted, but carefully, so as not to disturb the press of Draco's legs against his own. Hermione's voice was getting loud again, this time with annoyance, as Millicent questioned every aspect of her form to determine if it was really that of Dark Lady. "I thought we could... I don't know." Draco's eyes gleamed, something unidentifiable in them. "A total of 2 months spread apart, and you're nearly there. You're not average at it, not at all." "Maybe," said Harry. "That's 2 things, then. Quidditch and animagus learning, I'm good at those." "And Duglord killing," said Draco. He paused. "And wandless magic." Harry wrinkled his nose. "Funny." Draco's pale eyebrows shot up. "I didn't think modesty was a Gryffindor trait." "It isn't," Harry said. "But all I can do wandless is piddly little Lumos. Nothing special." "What do you call that muffling charm you just put up, then?" Draco asked. "I used my..." "Are you quite certain?" Draco said. Scowling, Harry reached for his wand to prove it with the a priori incantatem, but it wasn't on the table before him. It was, in fact, still in the harness on his sleeve. He pulled it out, stared at it dumbly. "I don't remember putting my wand away." "You never took it out, idiot," said Draco. Harry frowned. "But I practiced wandless magic in my room all the time, and I can never get it to work. Never laughs when I try." Draco sat up straighter. "I've seen you do it 3 times. Not just piddly little Lumoses either. Decent spells. Complicated spells." Harry focused on Draco's glass and the thought of Wingardium Leviosa to append it over his posh blonde head, but the glass stayed where it was, didn't even bother to give a shiver. Looked back at Draco, victorious, and then frowned again because there wasn't really any victory not being able to do wandless magic. "See? Nothing." The way Draco's mouth pursed when he was thinking was something Harry would never get out of his head. He took another drink, and Harry's eyes followed the path of his tongue as it licked the foam from his lips. "The times you've done it," said Draco. "Now that I think of it, you didn't seem to realize what you were doing. Like it was instinctive to use magic that way. Could be a part of your intuitiveness." Harry shrugged. Mrs. Weasley seemed to do household magic without thinking about it, but he'd always assumed she'd learned to do the spells wandless first. "Doesn't really do me much good if I can't do it when I want to do it." "But you do. You do it when you have a need for it. I've seen you." "So you said, but what's the point if I can't depend on it?" "If you can do it when you aren't thinking about it, then you just have to practice it without thinking about it." Harry snorted. "Brilliant, Malfoy." "It shouldn't be too difficult for you. It's how you've made it through school so far, isn't it?" Harry's eyes narrowed, but he refused to give Draco the satisfaction of commenting. "How do you suggest I even do that?" Draco smirked. "A bottle of Rosmerta's finest, a hot cauldron, and a complicated potion." Harry's mind went in a number of interesting directions at this. At this point, Hermione and Millicent's selective hearing selected to hear again. Harry felt the weight of their astounded gazes without even having to turn his head. Surprisingly, it was Millicent who spoke first. "Are you out of your sodding mind, Draco?" she hissed. "That's a combination just asking for an explosion. Potter would kill all of us." "I'm much better now," Harry protested. The girls gave him identical looks of annoyed tolerance. "I am. I've brewed 3 of our nude potions perfectly and 2 others satisfactorily. With the recipe, Hermione reminded him. You won't have one of those on nudes. Nor will one do you any good if you're off your face, Millicent added. Oh, for Merlin's sake, said Draco, who now had a determined glint to his eyes that Harry, for one, could appreciate. Potter's not a complete idiot. Here, Harry grinned triumphantly at Hermione and Millicent before fully passing the statement and scolding at Draco instead. Draco ignored him. And really, I don't care what you witches think about it. Harry and I are academics, and we're going to research what happens with this experiment. I've got a hypothesis for you, Malfoy, Millicent muttered. And I don't want to hear it, Draco replied. Empirical data only. Pushed back from the table, stared down at Harry. One blonde eyebrow quirked up. Well, are you coming or not? Harry scrambled to follow. Absolutely. Harry! Hermione said, exacerbated. Harry ignored her. Draco was already at the bar, securing a bottle of Rosmerta's house-brewed fire whiskey, and apparently placing a considerable sum of money down on the Wasps to win. Harry scowled again, remembering his not-ideal-against-Malfoy's tricky team lineup. He pushed out into the street to wait on the other men, and the chilly April wind caught against his pub-warmed cheeks as he stepped out. It was a shock to his system, one that almost made him gasp. It was a lot like being around Draco in that way. You might as well, Draco said as he carefully poured 2 tumblers of whiskey. You're going to have to know the liver repair elixir for newts anyway. It just seems, well... He gestured to the bottle of golden whiskey, his mouth quirked. I suppose I could think of it as being prepared for all eventualities. Never a better time to fix your liver than right after you've destroyed it. Draco agreed. And off we go. Drink up, Potter. And don't fuck up this potion, because I'll be wanting some as well. Harry downed it, scrunching his nose a bit at the hot sensation. All right, what in? Flame on. He looked beneath his cauldron to make sure this burner wasn't emotional on Sundays. It wasn't. Bring to a roiling boil, he read. Draco poured him another glass as the water heated up. Don't watch it, he said. It'll never boil. That's an old wife's tale. He swallowed his whiskey down again and felt the familiar happy warmth of impending drunkenness suffuse him. For muggles, maybe. Believe me, don't watch it. Well, that wasn't too hard to do. He'd just watch Draco instead. Draco, who had a rather pink mouth and terribly light lashes that were still somehow evocatively dark against his skin. Still somehow very smouldery. He licked his bottom lip again, and Harry followed the movement again. Why'd your parents name you Draco? He asked suddenly and then grimaced. Rosmerta's fire whiskey was serious, and he was definitely already feeling the effects if his mouth was running off without him. He refused to apologize for it. What else would they name me? They couldn't just call me Malfoy like you do. Harry shrugged, peeked at his cauldron quickly before Draco could see him looking. Still not roiling. Why not Tom or Daniel or... What horrifically common names, Draco said, that you could even suggest. I suppose you'd like if they called me Harry too, wouldn't you? Harry grinned. Not a bad name. One of the princesses called Harry. Prince of what? Draco said. Britain hasn't been a monarchy since Merlin's time. You'd even go to History of Magic class. Harry paused, opened his mouth to reply, and then very wisely changed his mind on the matter. Do you have a middle name? It's like you were raised by wolves, Draco said, seemingly to himself. Except there aren't any in Britain, so it must have been muggles instead. To Harry he said, I have an aristocratic surplus of middle names, Potter. None of which I like, none of which were truly necessary. They're just thrown in to appease important ancestors, so their portraits don't make a scene when we have company. Harry laughed. Which one's the worst? He checked his cauldron again, and finally it was at a roiling boil. Test for alkaline acid balance. Once equalized, add 2 fingers finely crushed astragalus root and simmer for 5 minutes. Zephania, maybe, Draco said. That was from before we came to England. Harry chuckled. Your name is gobs better than Zephania, he said. So pleased you approve, said Draco dryly. My mother chose it. Draco, Harry said, testing the word aloud. He got used to it in his head, but the sound coming from his mouth felt illicit and dangerous. I think this is only the second time I've ever said it. The first being 2 minutes ago. Draco, Draco, Draco. That's 5 times now. He laughed again, but when he looked at Malfoy he wasn't smiling. The look in his eyes was altogether baser, more intense than anything Harry had ever seen on him. The smile fell from Harry's face. The way you say it, said Draco. His voice caught, and he shook himself. Harry swallowed. Say what? Even though he knew exactly what word Malfoy meant. Draco. 6. Draco's eyes sunk closed, and when he opened them again, Harry was sure he'd take a step closer, that he'd reached out. His wand alarm buzzed, and the moment was lost. He felt unaccountably bereft. But Draco had already looked away, so Harry turned to his cauldron and found the astragalus root nicely incorporated in the mixture clear and effervescent. Steam 4 chicory roots sliced longwise in steaming basket above cauldron, to absorb essence of astragalus. And consistency of good pasta, slice into finger width and add to cauldron. Brew 6 minutes. I hate fucking steaming baskets, he muttered, scrounging around in his kit for the little copper sieve. He fished it out. It was a little dented, but the hovering charm was still in place, and it didn't wobble when he set it floating 3 inches above the cauldron tip. He set the chicory roots inside and watched them steam, as he didn't know what he'd do if he watched Malfoy instead. Draco. The way his name felt in Harry's mouth. He could get used to saying it far too easily. Harry, said Draco, and Harry jumped, caught by the unexpectedness of the sound. When he looked, Draco was smirking at him. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Harry shook his head. Sounds right. And then Draco's eyes cut away, glancing at the floor. His forehead crinkled up in thought for maybe half a minute before he noticed himself doing it and smoothed it out. You can keep saying it, Harry offered. Draco poured them both another shot instead. How's that potion? He asked, eyeing it from a safe distance. If you can brew drunk, then we can feel safe in you at least getting a nude. Whether you survive 3 years under Snape's rule is another story. I'm afraid you might have it even worse than usual. You'll be incredibly bored now that he's dead. I'll be fine, said Harry, who was quite confident in his ability to withstand Snape's verbal vitriol. It was the actual potions-based vitriol that worried him. You can't curse me now, or imperil me to drink poison, he added as an afterthought. He hoped he couldn't anyway. He tipped back the shot, failed to withhold a shivery, tongue-showing reaction to the fire whiskey, and returned to the text. Are you even tipsy? He asked as an aside. Reduce to meandering simmer. Cast 3 stasis charms of increasing power, beginning with 13 joules of charm power, and stir in 1 part sulfuric acid. Cover with lid and release stasis charms. Once sizzling explosion has subsided, remove lid and add 1 gram of mushed boggart liver. Brew for 2 minutes over medium-high heat. Yeah, Draco admitted, grinning. Are you? Harry bit his lip as he focused on upping the power in his charms. He wasn't the best at focusing his magic, preferring to just shove it all out there and hope for the best. It did serve him well enough so far. Potions was too subtle for that, though Snape would never hear Harry admit it. Bloody swimming, he said. These charms are going up by about 1 joule per, right? They look so wobbly to me. Think so, said Draco, but he didn't look convinced. Pass me that book. Harry said, flicking his hand in Draco's general direction. And that extra stirring pot. Harry complied again. The explosion went off as planned, and Harry found that mushing up boggart liver was more enjoyable by several degrees when intoxicated. It was, in fact, almost fun. May I borrow your potions kit? This time the voice came from directly behind him. Harry tensed in his mashing, but dutifully sent the kit floating back to Draco. What do you want with my potions kit?
Nothing.
There was a pause. Draco hadn't moved away. He was so close, Harry could almost feel the heat of his body in the air between them.
I just wanted to see if you'd do wandless magic again.
The statement hung between them, almost like an echo.
Which you did. I did,
Harry said, only now realizing it himself. He swallowed.
What now?
Draco's hands slid over his sides and held on.
Harry jumped.
Merlin, it felt like fiend fire was running through his veins all of a sudden.
Finish your potion. I don't think I can.
Surely the hitch in his voice was only his imagination. His wand buzzed again.
What's the next step?
Draco's voice was low and incredibly close. Every muscle in Harry's body was tensed and ready to spring. He made a gallant effort at steadying his breathing, found the spot in his text. Stir 100 times sunlight, brew 1 minute on high heat. Stir 100 times widdershins, brew 2 minutes on medium heat. Stir 100 times variated, brew 3 minutes on low heat. Remove from heat and cast 28 to 58 jewel cooling charm. Decant and seal with cork and wax.
Stir 100 times.
The fingers at his waist tightened for a second. Release.
Then do so. Don't lose count.
Harry nodded and began to stir. At 50, Draco's fingers moved. He only managed to keep count because Draco began counting aloud.
50, 51, 52.
And Harry, voice unsteady, counted with him, electrically aware of his ring finger trailing up Harry's bottom rib. At 100, he paused and attempted to steady his breathing.
What are you doing?
He whispered. Malfoy leaned in, his mouth barely not quite brushing the rim of Harry's right ear.
Don't ruin your potion.
Merlin, he could come from this probably. Hands shaking, he raised the burner to high. Draco's fingers continued ghosting over his ribs, barely touching, leaving Harry in shambles. His wand buzzed, and even the tiny vibrations it made against his thigh set his skin afire, as alert as he already was. He picked up the stirring rod and began again, stirring anti-clockwise.
1,
he whispered, and Draco pressed in further, one arm coming all around to hold his waist, his chest flush against Harry's back, and he was aroused. Harry's abdomen clenched tight between Draco's fingers, and he may have died again when Draco inhaled against his neck and said with him,
2.
There was no way this potion would be salvageable at the end of this. Harry wasn't even sure he would be salvageable. At 100, he wordlessly, adjusted the heat and just hung his head, letting Draco continue to devastate him, unable and unwilling to do anything about it.
The last time we were like this, it was on a broom,
said Draco.
You think about it too,
Harry said.
Yes.
Harry swallowed, kept his eyes closed. He had another minute and a half of this before he had to stir again.
Last time,
he said,
we were terrified. Are you terrified now?
Harry wondered. Things went poorly. Their friendship would die violently, unlike the sad, passive affair with his and Ron's. Could he go back to hating Draco? Could he even get on without having him around? Probably not.
Yes.
His wand buzzed. Very carefully he resumed stirring, clockwise on odd numbers, anti-clockwise on even. Draco's voice had dropped in pitch, and the numbers 1 through 100 took on new erotic connotations in Harry's mind. He would never see 13 again without feeling Draco's arousal pressing against him, only their robe separating the heat of their skin. He would never hear Hermione discuss the 42 rules of runes without shuddering at the memory of Draco's teeth nipping at his earlobe. There were 88 constellations in the night sky, but he would always know the number as the moment Draco's fingers slid beneath the hem of his shirt and skated over his skin.
100.
He lowered the heat, set his one-timer, and could not take it any longer. Harry turned, took hold of Draco's hand. His eyes scanned Draco's face, looking for what he had no idea.
"You'll ruin me,"
he murmured.
"Only if you let me."
Harry kissed him. He'd worried somewhere buried really deeply that Draco would shove him away, but he didn't. He kissed Harry back immediately, mouth hot and slick against Harry's own, and he moaned a little when Harry began to walk them backwards towards the wall.
"Your potion!"
Draco gasped, breaking away. Harry made an annoyed sound, flung a cooling charm at it, flung another to decant and seal the potion in a vial. There was a look of complete triumph in Draco's eyes, and Harry couldn't help but try to kiss it off of him.
"Fine,"
he murmured between kissing Draco's neck, unbuttoning the top of his robes, and continuing down to his clavicle.
"I can do wandless magic. You win." Apparently so,"
Draco said, arching up against his mouth. Somehow Harry managed to get all of Draco's Ponzi outer robes unbuttoned and flung out around them on the floor, and was already beginning on his own when Draco shoved him against the unused table and pushed his hands away.
"I've been thinking of this for ages. Merlin, Potter, you are so stupidly hot when you're brewing."
"Good," Harry said through a gasp. He threw his head back and shuddered. Draco's mouth was on his neck, following his fingers down as he loosened each button, kissing the exposed skin left behind. He gasped. Acute sensory overload. Draco flicked his eyes up at the sound. There was something in them, some look, that Harry couldn't endure. It was drunk and confident and amused and triumphant and soft, all at once. It was everything Draco was, plus that one extra thing he could be, but usually chose not to. It occurred to Harry then that he was probably in love, and that was a very dangerous place to be. He shuddered, curled his fingers more tightly in Draco's hair. He wasn't sure if he was trying to keep himself up or keep Draco from running, but he knew he had to hold on somehow. Every nerve in his body was on fire. Every breath he took felt like,
"Boys, I hate to interrupt."
They sprang apart, horrified, and swung to face a single portrait in the room, positioned above the desk Harry used for brewing. Dumbledore was beaming at them, and where on earth had he come from? How many times had he watched them working together in this room? How many—
"It's just that you forgot to turn off your burner, Harry, and I fear that the potion will soon begin producing those pesky deadly fumes that liver repair elixirs are wont to do when burnt. As much as I'd enjoy your company in my frame, I'm sure you both have a bit more living to get on with."
Here he winked at them. Harry's stomach plummeted through the floor, along with his ability to ever have an erection again, probably. But his cauldron was indeed beginning to smoke. They rushed to it, knocking shoulders in their attempt to douse the fire and vanish the smoke. In the process, they managed to vanish Harry's good cauldron as well, but Hogsmeade sought more, and he'd lived. He and Draco stared at each other, suddenly awkward. Drunken kiss hung between them, and Harry wondered if he'd ever be allowed to kiss Draco again after what clusterfuck tonight had been. Maybe he should try again with Ginny, since it appeared that she was the only person he was able to kiss without disaster.
As if, he thought.
His body was on fire with want for Draco, even after their uncomfortable interruption. He'd never be able to kiss anyone else again after this. He was utterly ruined.
"That went well,"
Harry remarked. He moved closer to him, unable to keep away, even as thoroughly embarrassed as he was. Merlin, but he still wanted Draco something fierce. There was always tomorrow, and preferably near a bed next time.
"Everything does with you,"
Draco muttered sourly. Harry's heart dropped, then Draco cracked a grin. Harry laughed, relieved.
"Come on then, Potter,"
said Draco.
"I don't think I can stand another minute in this room wondering if that dotty old headmaster is just beyond the frame listening. Do you hear that, headmaster?"
he called.
"I know what you're about."
They listened for shuffling ropes, but there weren't any. Harry took Draco's hand in his, and Draco let it happen. They were definitely still drunk, he decided. "Come on, then," said Harry, gathering up all his things with a wondless flick of his wrist. "It's getting late anyway." Draco yawned. "Bugger, I was going to start studying for the newts tonight." "Boring," Harry decided. "I think I'll go to bed instead." Although Harry seriously doubted he'd get a wink of sleep tonight. He could still taste Draco in his mouth, and it was so much better than the treacle tart. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Azoth by Zeitgeistic. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.